Three, two, one. Welcome all to this podcast that I've decided to record. I'm here with my friend Elijah. You can say hi if you want.
Hello.
And today, this is sort of a pilot episode for what I hope to be a series of some kind. The series doesn't really have any sort of coherent theme or whatever. It's just whatever I want to talk about and whoever I can get. So, yeah. And today's topic is on the legendary webcomic Homestuck. So, yeah, and if you're wondering why we're just doing it on a random day, I wasn't finished with the comic when 413 happened, and there was a bunch of other stuff that happened in between, so there you have it. So, I think we should start with our history of of the comic, and I'm fairly confident that we both come from a similar place regarding it. Like, we both found out about it because Toby Fox, creator of Undertale, used to make music for the webcomic.
Oh yeah, actually, it was Megalovania
Yeah,
too.
yeah, Megalovania was like the biggest and most obvious reference in Homestuck, most obvious Homestuck reference in Undertale, but there were a couple of other ones. The lava area that was a reference to Dave's Lohack planet. Lo-
Oh really?
yeah, you know how there was like lava and gears and like land of time, lava and
Oh,
time. And
that
also,
actually makes sense. I didn't know that.
yeah, so there's that, and also this one kind of made sense in hindsight. I forget his name, but do you remember like this weird ghostly figure that was like this muscular horse flexing all the time?
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah, the Equius reference. And then this one I think was just like a secret enemy that had like a rare chance of appearing, but there was like this enemy who was like it was a quadruped creature. It had four legs, but it had like certain design elements that was like similar to Jade's god tier form.
Oh,
Yeah, I think there's some other stuff that I can't quite remember off the top of my head. There's this dude called Optimistic Duelist who had a video about it. So yeah, it's one of his earlier videos. Speaking of him, he has like this whole series where he tries to like explain. It's called Homestuck Explain, and he explains everything from like the characters, the roles they play in, class aspects, pretty much everything that ever had like time spent showing off in Homestuck has like a video on it as well. So yeah. So, before I tell my story of how I eventually got around to reading it, how about you tell me that? Tell me your story of how you eventually got around to reading it.
well, I think when I first found out that it was on Homestuck, I'd heard of Homestuck before, but I never really went. The fan base is usually what you hear about first, and that's usually.
I didn't even know about. I had no idea what Homestuck was. Period. I didn't know anything about trolls. I didn't know anything about gray paint. I didn't know anything about. I barely even knew what Tumblr was at the time. I didn't know anything. Period. In a sense, didn't even know what a Homestuck was.
Uh, I had heard of it like just through that type of stuff where like I met people and they're like, yeah, the fan base is trash. So I tried avoiding it, and then that's when Undertale came out around. And when I got Undertale, I was listening to the music soundtrack that I got,
Yeah.
and I listened to Megalovania. I'm like, oh, I like this. So I found out there's remixes, and I found out that remember it was Megalovania was based off a song in Earthbound, wasn't it?
No, so the song itself, the composition, was based off of like a Toho song, I believe, and the name itself is not only is a reference to another song by the name of Megalomania, and the first version of it that would later be tweaked for Homestuck and then later essentially remixed for Earthbound, I mean Undertale, appeared in that Earthbound fan hack, that Halloween hack, and then funny thing, the version for the Earthbound hack and the version for Homestuck are actually quite similar. The only difference is that the audio quality for Homestuck sounds a bit more scaled up, and there's like a guitar solo, I believe, which is just like MIDI sound fonts of a guitar. Speaking of Megalovania, for a while, the from like 2016 to November of 2018, the only part of Homestuck I was familiar with was sound page Wake, which is the sound page that that song comes from. So it's basically the one where like you see Jack Noir destroying Durst, killing Fefri and Nepida's dream selves, and then it cuts to God Tier Vriska killing Tavros. So at the time, I had no idea what any of this was, but I loved it nonetheless. And I thought, and every time I would watch that in between those 2 years, I thought to myself, this comic is on some next level shit, which it was in more ways than one. Yeah, so that's pretty much all. I wanted to ask you because that's pretty much all my history with it. Finding out where Megalovania came from, and then watching S sound page Wake for on and off again for 2 years, and just having no idea what was going on, but enjoying it nonetheless. And then what actually motivated
Yeah, when I
me?
first like
Oh, you were saying?
when I first read it, uh, it was me. It was almost finished already, actually.
Yeah, the timeline.
But
Well,
I started. I'm like, ooh, this is
yeah, the comic itself was nearing the end, but the end of Homestuck wasn't necessarily the end of Homestuck, if you catch my drift.
yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't they just put in the ending
They put in the
recently?
um. So on this year's 413, the prologue to the epilogue was released, and then a week later on 420 was the rest of the epilogue, and I'm like a fourth of the way through it because there's like two routes, and like the whole thing is like is and the whole thing is made to look like is stylized to look like an archive your own fan fiction, and like the description,
Oh yeah.
yeah, the description of the epilogue is a tale of dubious authenticity,
I
and
think I only read like the first two pages.
yeah, and so far, so like there's the meat route and the candy route. The meat route is like 44 pages long, and then the candy route is like 41 pages long. I am like halfway through the meat route as we speak, as we recording, so I still have some ways to go. But yeah, I was a little overwhelmed at first because I thought to my because weirdly enough, reading the epilogues kind of like mirrored my experience reading Homestuck the comic, because like I was going through this and like, ugh, this is exhausting, and then at some point something happened and I was like, I gotta keep reading. So while I didn't actually get around to reading the comic till much later, I did try to give it a try in between the years of 2016 and 2018. But this was before the um, this was before the website updated, and it was still mspadventures.com. and I just had so many questions because like even before I got around to reading it, since the main attraction to the website was essentially Homestuck, I thought it was like Homestuck.com, which is right now. But the fact that it was called MSPA Adventures and there were three other um, web comics on there that he made, I thought to myself, do I have to read these as well? Which I didn't end up doing. And then when I tried to just like read Homestuck, I was confused as to why a web comic looked like a early 90s text adventure, and then like I was also confused as to why I couldn't just like tap an arrow to move onto the page. I actually had to click these links, and then like I remember also one, and I still, and like I knew that Homestuck existed at this time, but I wasn't sure what it was. I wasn't sure if it was a webcomic or just a series of YouTube videos. Because around this time, a YouTube channel by the name of like Phonics or whatever started doing a Let's Read of Homestuck, and they had been working on that since like 2016. They last posted a video like a year ago in that series anyway.
Huh.
And like right now they're at Act 6, Intermission 3, I believe, and like the last video they uploaded was like an hour and 10 minutes long. So and like knowing what comes up after that point, I understand why it's taking them so long to actually make a dub of it. So yeah. Uh,
Takes me a long time just.
it would
I started reading a second,
yeah. What?
and yeah, I started reading it a second time. Like, because you brought it up. I'm like, I haven't read this so long, so I reread it all. Huh, I didn't remember that.
Yeah. So yeah, yeah. If I ever get her, I mean, I'm sort of rereading Homestuck as well, but in a different way. Cause like, I'm pretty sure you're aware of like Homestuck, teaming up with like Viz Media to release book versions of the comic.
Oh yeah, I heard about that actually.
Yeah, so they've released four now. Book one is Act 1 and 2. Book 2 is Act 3 and the Midnight Crew intermission. The book 3 is Act 4. And book 4 is Act 5, Part 1, aka Hive Bent. And I mostly bought those because like they have author commentary from Andrew Hussey himself, and I was like, that's mostly what I'm reading, and any sort of pester logs that I might want to reread because like um, I did there were some points, especially when I was reading these at night, where I was like skimming through
Yeah,
pester logs, and and
yeah. When I first read them, it's like I definitely a lot of their logs.
yeah, I mean, I don't even think I even got to pester logs those first couple of attempts. Then like I think this is even before they had like the autosave feature as well, but I might be wrong on that. So the fact that I had that yeah, that I could save threw me off, but that wasn't so much a big deal when I and like I think one thing that helped me get through actually helped me get through Homestuck wasn't the change of the website because like it did not look very aesthetically pleasing, um,
Oh yeah.
and and like Andrew Hussey himself said in like a news post on the new website that the reason he decided to do this was because like while he knew how to code and how to code a website, the website itself had pretty much was like the coding equivalent of like duct tape and glue, and he wanted a better form of preservation for everything else on the website.
Honestly, I don't know if the books will do too well because I don't know if they have the appeal that the website did. Because the
Um,
website did seem like a text adventure, and that's I think what the appeal was.
Basically, like what the books do is that like they have like the panels are like neatly organized, and like they still have after we're done recording this, I'll switch to like the video mode and like show you what like because like this isn't the first time the books were that Homestuck books were published, but he only ever got around to like publishing 3 books, and I think they were like acts 1, 2, and 3 respectively. And I think he stopped not only because of all the popularity that was coming around at the time, but also I didn't think he could afford to print everything from Act 4 and beyond neatly into a a paperback book, because like there's no paperback equivalent to these new books. They're all like hard covered.
Oh yeah, definitely. I had a lot of trouble like navigating the site at first. I remember because like
Yeah.
I was doing it on when I first read it, and so when I read it on my phone, flashes wouldn't play correctly.
Yeah, that's another reason why he wanted to switch, was because he wanted to have better mobile support. I read a good chunk of this on my phone whenever I had like um, downtime at school, and to you can still activate the flash stuff, but most of the time, with the exception of like some of the games, um, everything's like a YouTube video.
Yeah. Uh, I definitely had a lot of trouble because it's all flash.
Yeah,
I think I skipped a lot of when I first read. I skipped a lot of the flash thing.
dang. Like, uh, I'm not sure, because one major roadblock I sort of ran into when I first read this was when I got to Act 4, and I was sort of like got lost. And so like basically if you have flash enabled, you'll have the gameplay, but if you don't have the flash, it's pretty much just like a series of screens. So it's basically functions the same way it does in the book, where you're pretty much just like reading a bunch of screenshots of the stuff you're already going to read if you had the persistence to navigate this space.
I can see that.
Yeah, and speaking of the Act 4 game, um, so you know the theme that plays during that section, like the song Doctor, I believe it's called.
I think so. Yeah.
You know, it's a do thing. I haven't listened to enough to memorize it. So not only is that song like very beloved in the fandom, because apparently it's like the unofficial theme of of the webcomic, and many of the music team members remixed it to some degree or used leitmotifs. Like the first song that got Toby recognized in the Homestuck fandom was a remix to that song that was playing when John officially went God tier. And I bring that up because, like, I think the day I started reading Homestuck, or at least very near the day I started reading Homestuck, the guy who composed that song had apparently died.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because I remember like listening to that song, because like I was just curious, and I was like, man, this thing is so beautiful. And then I just like start scrolling down to the comments, and I start seeing people say R.I.P. George, his name was, and I was like, what the heck? And then I like Googled him, and then like I found out that like he died on November 8th, and that's like the same week, if not the same day, I started reading the webcomic.
Huh.
And like Toby Fox on his Tumblr posted a link to to not only the Doctor, but also the song he made, which was a remix of it. And on a somewhat lighter note, do you know what Toby Fox's first Tumblr post was?
No, actually.
It was a edit of a Garfield comic. The original comic was John sitting on his computer, saying like "I've got mail," smiling back at Garfield, and then smiling back at his computer while Garfield looks disgruntled. But Toby took that comic and replaced "You got mail" with "Homestuck." I kind of found that little funny. So um, so let's get down to like what I plan to do is that we'll go through each of the acts, and then um, and then we can and like in between the discussions we can talk about like characters and what we think about them, as well as like what we thought about the story as we entered these acts and we would read through these acts. Okay, so let's start where most people start when reading this, Act 1. How do you feel about Act 1?
Hmm. Honestly, I really liked Act One
Yeah,
a lot.
yeah, most people say that like Act 1 was sort of hard to get through, but then like you grow to appreciate it more, not only with like how much the comic grows over the course of its run, but also just like how many callbacks to it as well. You know,
I think
you were saying
I think my favorite thing about Act probably because of how many
how many?
shitty jokes that go through it. Like I
There's
have,
there's a lot of like you said there was a lot of shitty jokes that you just couldn't
and
help.
that's what makes me laugh quite a
Yeah,
bit. And
funny thing about those jokes is that like I don't know if you know this or not, but from Acts 1 to 4, I want to say maybe 3 is where it stopped. Um, every command you would click on to move along was like reader submitted and was like voted on through a suggestion box. It's also how most of the characters got.
really,
Yeah, it's also how most of the characters got their names. Um, John, Rose, Dave, Jade, and all of the trolls' names were the product of reader submissions. And what's interesting about the Dancestors later on is that they're comprised of like rejected names for each of their respective trolls. So like to give an example, Cancree was a rejected name for Karkat.
really,
Yeah, so Horace, well, Rufio is sort of the exception because that was just a Rufio reference. And I don't know if you know this as well. So Rufio from the movie Hook, he was played by a young Dante Bosco, who you might know as like Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender, amongst other roles he's done. And
huh?
so what's interesting is that like Rufio is essentially not only a reference to the character Rufio, but he is also like a Dante Bosco reference because his dialogue is based off of how Dante Bosco would write on his Tumblr, and this wasn't even what and apparently Dante Bosco got into Homestuck as well, and it didn't even start with this. It's because you know that scene where like the regular human Rufio gets like killed, and then Andrew Hussey tries to revive him with a kiss. That was
Oh yeah.
that was one of the reasons to get Dante Bosco into Homestuck, and then like Rufio, the the troll Rufio comes around, and then like at one point he talks about how he's glad that Rufio is in the comic as a character, and he talks about how much he loved it, and he posted a picture during like the alter one of the Alternia bound sections where you talk to Rufio, and it's a dialogue where he mentions that some weird orange guy tried to revive me with a kiss. To, if I could derail for a bit, what actually got me interested in reading the comic for real was like I've shown you. It was that video I showed you of like the RPG monger talking about the Homestuck fandom for his Fandom Files series. And if I could talk about the Homestuck fandom in retrospect, I'm kind of jealous I wasn't a part of it because at the time there was plenty of frustrations, but in retrospect, the worst thing about it was just like annoying kids. And that's it.
Yeah.
Cuz like you hear about I was in like I was in like fandoms that had like horrible people of all kinds. It was like it was to the point where annoying children was like the least of all problems because we had like some criminals and just like racists in there and
Yeah,
just
I can see that.
yeah and just like to look back at a fandom where the only thing you had to worry about was like annoying kids and the occasional idiot makes me jealous.
Honestly, I think the fandom that I was most part of like was probably Undertale.
Yeah, I was to a degree, but I never like watched like comic dubs or didn't or played any fan games or whatever. Um, I'm sort of ashamed to admit, but not in the ways that you might think, that I used to be a brony. I'm not ashamed to admit it because, like, I was into a quote unquote girls' cartoon. I was driven away from it because when I mentioned a fandom filled with criminals, racists, and whatever, that was the one. I won't
Yeah,
into
I can.
yeah, I won't get into I'll probably tell you what made me want to leave after this recording, but it was just it was like one of it was like it was just so bad. But to go back to Act 1, um what was pretty much what amazed me about Act 1 was like it looks like something that came from 2009, and then like whenever I would read the pester logs, it was like I was teleported back to 2009 2010 because like I was surprised to find out that when Andrew Hussey started writing Homestuck he was like 30, and I was like, oh my god, a 30-year-old man captured the decade so perfectly.
Definitely. Like just with I think I relate to John quite a bit because I'm into a lot of like shitty movies that like are so bad.
And like what really the movie poster that made me laugh the most was like Mike and Me or whatever, which was pretty much like this cheap ET knockoff of like if you thought ET was ugly, this alien was on a whole new level of ugly. And 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 of course there's his love of Con Air, which plays many different sorts of roles throughout the web comic. But like my favorite Con Air reference is like when he's watching it for like his 15th birthday or whatever with Jade on that spaceship, and then
And he
like
just doesn't shit.
yeah he just goes like Jade, yeah, this movie sucks, and then he goes on this whole tirade about pretty much every criticism anyone has ever lofted at that movie, and also the
Yeah,
scene, and also the
I
scene,
can see that.
and and also the scene where like we first see ectobiology in practice, and then that flash where he like shunts off everyone to their respective timelines, and like that song's playing in the background, and then you just see Carcat frustrated, and then Toretti comes over just like laughing at what's on screen, and he's feeling all insecure. And then there's that scene there's two scenes, one where it's the poster but it's with John, Dave, and Carcat, and then it's where John's just like air guitaring to a non-existent guitar solo. uh, and so basically the best way I would feel to describe Abe Act 1 is just as like pretty much like pinnacle late 2000s internet comedy, because like once like all of this like stuff is built up and then like the meteors start crashing down and we go into act 2, it still has that sense of like what early 2010s internet comedy was like, but now since there's more of a story that we're aware of that something is building up to, it feels more focused than act 1 is.
Oh yeah, definitely. I
uh
think as it gets along, it becomes jokes
yeah, because
more so.
there's still jokes at the end of the day, but then like not only is like Hussey more focused on the story he wants to tell, because from Act 5 and beyond he stopped using um, reader submissions, because at this point Homestuck was so popular that he couldn't keep up with it. And also he wanted to have
Yeah,
more. He also just wanted to have more creative control over the comic in general.
there's
It's
definitely a lot more drama
Yeah, there's more
towards like
drama.
the
You know, in one of the author notes of one of the Homestuck books, he mentions that that Homestuck is a place where cool and hype stuff can possibly happen, and it does indeed happen. But you are sorely mistaken if you think Homestuck is anything other than a group of teenagers being angsty over the internet. Yeah, cause like that's pretty,
yeah.
especially once like the kids get to meet the alpha versions of their relatives, especially with like interactions between Dave and Dirk, especially that final one before Collide happens. Oh man, so
Or
much, so
he's just
much.
talking about how like shit of a brother he is.
Well, he was in his timeline, and Dave is still like the coolest dude even when he's an adult, and because like he sort of like single-handedly saved the world or whatever, or at least put
From
one.
the insane clown
Yeah,
posse.
from the insane clown posse under the guidance of Guy Fieri, the Antichrist.
Yeah.
Yeah. uh, it's so I'm kind of when I got to that point, I thought to myself, I'm kind of impressed that like such silliness is on display, and yet it's we can still take this seriously to a degree, because like in a vacuum this is so silly, but what's actually going on is a emotional and detailed story of how like the earth was just like barely saved and sort of had some sort of destructive repercussion in the process.
And meanwhile, you have like an emotional talk between two of the biggest or
Yeah,
two
and
of the main characters.
I thought it was surprising enough that the showdowns between Dave and Bro, as he's called in that universe, were not only recontextualized as like physical abuse, but like I was shocked to find out that, did you know that Beta Universe Dirk was like in his 30s and Dave's like half his age? So it makes it even worse, because
Really?
I thought he was like in his 20s or something, but that's even
Yeah.
more scary that a 30-something-year-old man is beating up a 13-year-old.
Yeah, that's why Dave like brings up like he was like horrible. Like it took a I don't remember how many seasons or how to realize that.
It was I think it was somewhere in Act 6, but it's interesting because like in the beginning you have all of this like you have all of this tech narration text and uh, chat logs talking about how like he's sort of like idolizes his brother to a degree, like he's like an idol to him, whatever. And then over the course of the comic, he slowly starts to realize and comes to terms with how horrible evil. Well, no, I wouldn't say evil, but just like how much of a horrible brother he was, and like he probably only did any sort of heroic things like slicing that meteor in half and actually causing the scratch as sort of like a last ditch attempt at redemption.
Oh yeah, it's like sort of the opposite with Dave and John, where John kind of hates his dad, but
Because like Hussey himself said that one of the first major twists in the story is that you find out that like John's dad is actually a serious businessman, which I wasn't really surprised by because like I don't know, something about it is a it, I didn't I guess because I wasn't really paying it. I didn't know John's dad was doing all this goofy stuff. I thought the fact that I mean, to a degree, him being a serious man, being a serious man is him being shocked that his dad's a serious man is a joke, but it's a joke in the sense that it subverts our expectations. But I thought it was a joke in the sense that John is now realizing something that was incredibly obvious.
yeah,
But that still doesn't change the fact that like even though his dad isn't really into clowns, he does all of this stuff because he thought
still
his son was
he
into it.
thinks that John is.
Yeah, and like it's kind of fitting. Most people find it fitting that like John's dad, or Dad Egbert as we should say, was the only one to survive, because like I mean the closest thing to a better person, to a good person that we have aside from John's dad is Rose's mom, and she's an alcoholic.
Yeah,
And because aside from that, we have like Dirk, the abusive brother, and then like um, Jake,
James,
who's
dead
just,
grandpa.
yeah, he's like a poacher or whatever. Funny thing, um, I feel glad I'm not the only one who made this mistake, but even with the stitches on his body, I had no idea he was a stuffed corpse when when he first made like a presence and like Jade was pretending to fight him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Hussey himself said I had to add stitches to his corpse, and yet people still thought he was alive. And he mentions with like, yeah, because it's totally normal for living people to stand on stools with golden plaque name tags. Um. So yeah, but like, I think like the funniest panel regarding like Jade in like her youth is like we see her being all like young and cute and whatever, and then in like it cuts this photo of a butterfly. The next page is the rifle next to it, and then it's just Jade going boom with his musket. uh, and also, yeah, there's also that like, and there's also that scene where we're like, baby Jade is like playing with the flintlock pistols, and then
Yeah.
it's just and then the bullets deflected to him like having some sort of dinner on a cruise or whatever. You know, for a while, I thought the phrase "this is why babies shouldn't dual wield flintlock pistols" came from that scene, but it was actually when baby Jade shot his guardian. Honestly, I can this probably wouldn't have like gotten approved, but if I kind of wish my senior quote was "This is why babies shouldn't dual wield flintlock pistols," or at least like
uh,
baby shouldn't dual wield flintlock pistols. But yeah, my other like high school yearbook quote was another like Andrew Hussey quote, but I kind of wanted to leave on like a positive note, and like it isn't it's comedically negative, but like most people, especially nowadays, aren't like familiar with the writings of Andrew Hussey, so yeah, I didn't really go with it. It was the quote was like he does like interview for like a Viz Media promotional video, and it was like this home the question was like, does Homestuck get better, and he was like, if it hasn't gotten better at this point, it probably won't, but there's always a chance that it could get worse. So yeah, I didn't want anything too negative to be interpreted from my quote. So Act Two is when the true nature of Homestuck's is the seed of Homestuck, as I like to call it, is sort of planted, and we not only get to see like more of Rose. I think this is when Dave is properly introduced as Dave. We get to see his appearance and his name, and then he does all of his shenanigans as well. And yeah, we learn about his good, good Act Two, while being a little more focused and having more in common with what we associate with Homestuck. I still feel like at the end of the day is just a more focused version of a humorous gaming webcomic. So there's still all these like shenanigans going around, except now you're in Abyss. There's fires everywhere, puppets, cheap ass swords, um, and of course the second greatest thing Andrew Hussey ever created, Sweet Bro and Hella Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah, um I've only read like a couple of those comic pages, but what I pretty much did is that I went to this dude who like back in 2012 uh like did a dub of like all of them, and like in addition in addition it's sort of like my feelings towards Sweet Bro and Hella Jeff is sort of like a polar opposite to how I felt about like early Homestuck. While early Homestuck perfectly captures what like the early 2010s were like on the internet, Sweet Bro and Hella Jeff was like predictive of like the humor that would come like from 2015 and beyond.
Oh yeah, definitely now like you see with like the what's it
Yeah,
like
like
baked and
you go to you go to like the surrealist meme Reddit, and then like surreal memes on Twitter, and just like any sort of, and most of the stuff that happened on like the Eric Andre show.
yeah, definitely memes in general.
Yeah, I remember like I tried to see how far one of my other friends could get into Homestuck the comic, and he only said he only got like 4 pages in, and then like I showed him some pages of like Sweet Bro and Hella Jeff, and he was just like dying of laughter. I can't remember. The only page I can remember seeing is that one where like the two are on the couch, and it's like this. The worst the worst part about Sweet Bro and Hella Jeff is that like due to how intentionally crappy the dialogue is, it's hard to remember quotes that aren't referenced in Homestuck, but like you can remember all of the images like perfectly, because like it was that one where like one of them was like having sex with his mom or whatever on the couch, and then yeah, I just remember he was like laughing really hard at those pages I showed him. Eh, obviously,
I don't know. I think as a generation, our comedics or what we like nowadays completely in general.
yeah. And um what uh I think, man, it's just merely thinking about like what Sweet Bro and Hell. I wonder what people thought of it at the time, and then like and then like when time passed and they went back to that, they're like, oh my god, this was so predictive, and like the influence. Well, I wouldn't say influence, but more like the popularity of Homestuck at its peak. I was quite surprised and overwhelmed by, because like you find out certain people you never would have suspected were fans of to be fans of this were indeed fan of this. The two examples I would like to bring up were like two voice actors who are not only like respected online but also have got like legit voice acting gigs. Those two being Octopimp, of course, and I forget her real name, but online she's known as Rena Chan, and I think her name's like Kira Buckley, I think, or something else like that. And I was like surprised by that as well. I was especially surprised by like Octopimp because like he lost interest in Homestuck like around 2015, I believe. He made a whole video about it, and from like 2011 to 2014, he was sort of like not only one of the most popular, well, the second most popular Homestuck fan at the time. The first being Toby, of course, but like he to many people he was sort of like their favorite interpretation of Gamzee and Eridan. And like you know the Niet meme associated with Eridan, that came from an Octopimp video where he just wanted to have like a startling noise of some kind, and that one just so happened to fit. And while Eridan himself never said "nyeh" at all in the comic, his dance sister did, as sort of like a joke. Yeah, yeah. Speaking of, you know, to some fans, they wanted this. They didn't wish Eridan got killed off so soon, and I do feel that same way, but to a degree, but only because I found him to be pathetically hilarious. E- Even more, I felt the same way to his dance sister as well. The moment that sticks out to me the most is
I don't know. I think was I don't remember if it was towards the end that Gamzee died.
uh Gamzee. Well, his fate. Well, he couldn't really die because of his plot armor, of course, but like well, he appears in the epilogue, but to explain how would sort of be like spoiler y. And have you read the epilogues at all?
I've only read like the two chapters,
So like
or
did
not chapters. I mean, first two pages.
so you haven't gone past the prologue. Well, like he makes a brief cameo in the meat route, and then he has more.
Okay, good. I was kind of scared.
And but in the candy route, he has like more of a role, and he actually has speaking parts, and yeah. So you could choose whatever route you want, but if you're really interested in the fate of Gamzee, I guess you could like um, because like in the candy route, I haven't gone around to reading it yet, but like I know some things that happen in it. So basically, like he gets released from that fridge he was trapped in, and then like he just um what this isn't a spoiler, but like the thematic purpose of the candy route is sort of to like commentate and sort of deconstruct the need to have certain villains redeemed because you just want them to stay there. So like Gamezee is released. They try to redeem him, but Gamezee being Gamezee, he does a whole bunch of crazy stuff, and I don't know what happens. I just know he just does a bunch. But actually, I do know one thing that happens, and this isn't a spoiler. At some point, like Gamzee drinks like breast milk, but I don't know how he does it. So Gamzee just
I don't know. Gamzee's always been one of my.
yeah. I, f- I, f- I found him interesting too, and like I don't know why I like him so much or whatever. I I've been like because every time I think about Gamzee, I thought to myself, If he used his rage for good, he probably would have been like one of the most effective characters on the hero side, but he had to go and like because all of this rage was due to him having like an existential crisis and not knowing what to do with all of these emotions, and him being like so emotionally vulnerable that he ended up working with Caliborn. And
He, I wasn't expecting him to be so strong.
yeah, cause like I didn't notice this at first, but like he would you know that scene where like where he like encounters Nepeta and like he grabs her wrist and starts scratching himself with the claws. He is so strong that he broke her wrist by merely clenching it.
I didn't know that honestly. Like when I first read it, like I wasn't expecting him to be so strong, and I didn't know like how like the blood type worked at first.
Well, yeah, no one really expected anything from Gamzee period because at the time the horror stuck section, as its nickname is, was like a legitimate surprise and shock to many people, and like there's like some reaction videos that I saw at those specific moments, and it was just kind of like surreal, like because these were like genuine expressions of like shock and surprise, and it was so surreal because like while this isn't really much of a problem nowadays, most reaction type videos are sort of like exaggerated to some degree. While some of them do come from like a genuine place to a degree, it's played up for the sake of like entertainment or comedy. But like if you go to like any sort of like Homestuck reaction video of any kind, while there is a degree of performance, especially if you find like later ones, those emotions, especially from like fans during the peak of its relevance and long time fans who stuck around are like genuine emotional expressions, and it was kind of like surreal to like bear witness to.
Yeah, it wasn't until later that I realized like, oh wait, Gamzee has royal blood, and I didn't know that.
Yeah. 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 Uh, this is only somewhat like related to Gamzee, but like one of my favorite like home Homestuck fan comics was this one where like Terezi in her cop uniform pulled over Kurlos and Mulin when they were in a car, and it sort of went like, you do know why I pulled you over, right? Ah, yes, you want to play the game. The game? The find the drugs in the car game. And then goes to Carlos going, Mulin, we actually have drugs in the car this time. If we could like talk about the ancestors for a bit, one thing I was actually I found interesting when I was doing like research on this was that the ancestors were like one of two things. They were either like um, polar opposites to the beta trolls, and or they were like exaggerated parodies of either the trolls themselves or misinterpretations of of the misinterpretations fans would have of the trolls. So it's sort of why Kankri is this exhausting bore of a person who does nothing but give like backhanded political philosophy. And it's also like why Mulin is this somewhat unbearable fangirl type character. And it's also and so yeah, that interpretation of being, and it's also why Horace Equius is Dan Sister is complete has completely no shame about his attraction to horses and being a horse otherkin. Honestly, my favorite part about Horace is the fact that when his boyfriend gets all his bones broken, instead of building a proper exoskeleton suit, he builds him a horse exoskeleton suit. Yeah. I remember like I was telling my mom about like Homestuck, and like my explanation only covered like maybe 20%, and like just because I knew I was losing her, I kind of went into like the weirder stuff like the dance sisters, and I told her about Equius and Horse, and she was just like, "Oh my god, this comic is insane." And then like I told her about like Solix and his uh Dancester Matula, and how he not only types the way he does, but he also misspells words. And the reason he misspells words is because he did something that damaged his brain to such a degree that he can barely communicate, and like he only has like a slimmer grasp of sanity. And then he replied to me with, "None of this sounds sane." So I feel like Act Two and Three can are pretty similar in my mind, because I remember when I was like going through this YouTube channel that had like uploads of the Flash videos. I thought certain parts that happened in Act Two actually happened in Act Three, and vice versa. Honestly, if I'm being it, honestly, the only like eventful parts that happened in between those two acts, because like acts 1 and 3 were pretty much just like set up for the real meat and potatoes of what Homestuck would not only become but would also be remembered for. Because like the only truly memorable moment I can say from those two acts were the moments with Jay, pretty much every moment with Jade, the introduction to Prospit, and and them finally getting around to like entering John's planet. Mostly because the animation is not only like at that time the most like smooth, clean, and interesting to watch, but it also had one of my favorite songs, Suburban Jungle as it's called, playing in the background. And contrary to what most people who never read Homestuck would think, instead of immediately going to Act 4, we go to a little intermission as we meet the Midnight Crew. So, what was your reaction when the Midnight Crew were introduced?
Honestly, the first time I saw the Midnight Crew, I was like, I want to read more Homestuck. Why is this here?
That's what a lot of people.
And then
That's what a lot of people said at the time.
when I started reading, I'm like, oh, this is alright. And then definitely the second time that I read it, I'm like, this is actually pretty funny and fun to watch because like
Yeah,
it's got like
because not only are the Midnight Crew themselves doing like these silly things, but with like a straight face, you have the members of the Felt, excluding Snowman, doing they have all of these like great and useful time related powers, but very rarely do any of them use them responsibly.
not only that, it's more like it's like Homestuck but trying to be edgy, but
I,
it's like doing that on purpose and it makes me laugh.
I wouldn't I wouldn't. I wouldn't really call it edgy, but like, go since when I got around to that point, I had known about stuff that Andrew Hussey had did before Homestuck, so I was like vaguely familiar with it with the previous effort Problem Sleuth, which just was sort of like a semi sequel to, because the inventory system that the Midnight Crew uses is similar to the inventory system that's used in Problem Sleuth. And Problem Sleuth is sort of like um, was not only the precursor to Homestuck in the sense that it came before it, but also in the sense that like it started out in a small scale sense, and then despite the fact that it's only like about 2,000 pages, it goes to some pretty weird and interesting places that only really served as like a warm up for what Hussey would do later down the road. And like what would happen to Homestuck later down the road, there was this like epilogue for Problem Sleuth that had the Midnight Crew as like antagonist, I believe, and so that's where the Midnight Crew came from. And then he thought to myself that these characters are too well designed to be merely part of a one-shot epilogue. So he brought him back and not only made him part of like made him like significant parts of the story, but also like
Major
yeah,
antagonist.
major antagonists. You know,
Like I wasn't expecting that at first.
yeah, cause I was caught off guard to some degree, mostly because I just wasn't expecting it. But since I had an idea of what Problem Sleuth was, I thought to myself, oh, he's just like he's just revisiting his Problem Sleuth mindset. That's what he that the Midnight Crew intermission actually served as him wanting to take a break, because like while most of Homestuck early on was just like made on the spot and posted that day, he did have like a basic outline for what he wanted to do. And he realized while making Act 3 and planning for Act 4 that all of this was starting to balloon into something much bigger. So to avoid burnout, he wanted to focus on something smaller, and he wanted to take advantage more of reader submitted commands. And he even like got to be playful a little more, because like there's a mini he said this in the Midnight Crew commentary, talking about how like most of the requests wanted me to do something with this character, or to be this character, or to do this specific thing. So I would take a request, make a page for it, and then completely like subvert their expectations. Because like there's one thing that says be this guy, and then when you click the link it says you are now this other guy. And he said that like I would agree to take your submissions. I never said I would live up to the man, or something like that. Because I think like one of the commands said B clubs deuce, and then when you hit the link, it says you are now this other guy. Yeah, I honestly, while I did enjoy um, the Midnight Crew intermission, and while I did not know that there would be multiple different versions of Spade Slick, aka Jack Noir, aka Beck Noir, and I did not know that like the universe that the Midnight Crew are in is essentially just like Alternia destroyed and then rebuilt from like the ashes. Because that's
Yeah, when I found out, like,
because like
once you continue the story and you find out, oh, sorry.
yeah, I was just gonna say that like because that's why Jack Noir exists in this timeline, but it's a slightly different timeline. It's why Spade Slick knows who Carcat is initially.
And then you have all these versions of Jack North. Like I wasn't expecting. I'm like, oh, this is part of the actual Homestuck
Yeah,
story.
because like no, it doesn't really start to click until that part where like Doc Scratch essentially like hijacks the narration, and then Hussey
Yeah.
comes in, busting through the window, and then beats him up with like a broomstick or whatever. Little did we know that while that was a short term victory in the sense that he got his control back, it would serve it would inevitably have some long term negative repercussions down the line.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could derail for a bit, I do find it funny that like even with Andrew Hussey dead in the comic, he's still narrating Homestuck. And honestly,
Oh yeah.
if I had to choose a favorite part of Homestuck, it's all the times he's talking with Caliborn, because like he know a lot of his dialogue would commentary for this hasn't come out yet and probably won't for like a while, but I wouldn't be surprised if his interactions with Caliborn were based on how he interacted with haters online, because like one of my favorite examples is that like because like Caliborn was based off of like um uh haters of whatever, so he pretty much just like well, haters and pretty much just like bored immature teenage boys. So like so like my favorite example of like Hussy IRL dealing with haters online is that like he talks about there's like this dude on Twitter who was like talking about how much Homestuck sucks, his character sucks. I think like he called him like a pretentious tool or whatever, and the only thing Andrew Hussey said to him was, "Go away." Yeah, and then like another dude was talking about how much of a bad character like Caliborn was, and then his reply was like, "How ironic that the type of people who inspire Caliborn hate Caliborn." Yeah, yeah. Honestly, while there was like whenever people would ask him questions, he would like in a joking manner, of course, respond to them in a sense in a sincere sense to some degree. His response to like stupid questions and just obnoxious people are hilarious, and like if I ever become like a popular person, whether online, in real life, or both, and people just like do this to me, I'm just if I don't feel motivated if I feel motivated to respond, I'm just gonna just like do what Hussey did.
Yeah.
I do hope I'm in a position where like somebody is just like constantly bugging me, especially so if they have like an entire thread. I'm I'm just gonna comment with "go away" in all caps. So yeah, so after there's one more thing I want to say about the Midnight Crew intermission. I did not know this until I like reread it in the book, because like while I mainly got the books to read the author commentary, there were moments in between where I like wanted to like read certain parts again. So I was like reading the section where like they were talking about like the sprite flipping joke, where like if you were to or flipping sprite actually involves like mirroring it. So like not only do we see the first one, not I think the first Hussey said that like he compared the sprite flipping logic to like how play instructions work, and like he was talking about the scene where like Snowman stuck like a knife in Jack's eye, and he was asking one of his crew members to like put the left eye patch on, but due to the fact that the spread was slipped, right right, left was right, and he said, no, not that right, no, not that left, the other left, and like the sprite flipping joke is brought back when he's trying to like have that barcode scan so he can enter the safe, and I was just like, I didn't notice this at first except for maybe the barcode scanning joke, but then like when I was reading the commentary and he was going into detail about how all this worked, I was like, oh my god, that's so amazing. Yeah, so um the the so the Midnight Crew intermission ends, and we are brought back to John and the gang as we enter John's planet. Um, and then, like, you have that game where you interact with all the salamanders and such. And honestly, the only really remarkable, I think at the time it was quite an impressive thing, but this has let, but I think it's like I don't really think it has aged well. Not necessarily in the sense that like it's a flash game that you need a flash thing to operate in a day and age where flash is essentially on its last legs, but also just the fact that like there's nothing aside from the music. There's nothing you can't you can pretty much get the same thing out of just like reading the screenshots in the book and also what the non-flash version of the game is like now. Because at the end of the day, while you can like attack imps and such with your hammers, um, you're basically just like going around reading lore.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Honestly though, like John is my favorite character to follow.
really, because like I do, this was mostly by design, but I feel like mostly everyone else is a lot more interesting than John, which I think like just says a lot about the quality of writing where even the most least interesting character still has these incredible moments of not only just like action but also like dialogue, and that's doubly so in the epilogues as well. but
Yeah.
but John,
I don't know. There's just something about John.
I think it's because like John, even though he does grow into his own character down the road, is that even as well written and fully fleshed out as he is sort of meant. He's the closest thing we have to a a audience POV character, because at the end of the day, John just kind of like goes through the motions, which fits with his theme of like wind and such. But it's and like the without spoiling anything, John, what John loses in relatability in the epilogue, you do see him develop more as a character in both routes, and it's because he's come to the realization that his life up at this point was pretty much spent with him going through the motions and just like not being being relatively passive in the whole experience and his life to a degree. Though even though
I don't know.
I do,
I gotta say,
you can speak.
I do gotta say, while John simplified than the others, more relatable than anybody else.
Well, yeah,
Even towards the end of the story.
I had moments where I like felt for him and had moments that felt familiar to me, but if I'm gonna be honest, the one I sort of like related the most to was Carcat. I don't know if that has anything to do with me being a cancer or not, but like there are so many because because like while I too I never had a life as hard as he did because I never had to hide myself from the world at risk of being killed. There I mostly through my formative years to me, well, actually, from like my I will actually say my formative years, those formative years being from like age 9 to 16. I went through a lot emotionally cuz like from 3rd grade to the second half of 8th grade, I had like no friends at all. um I had no friends at all. Everyone made fun of me, either because they thought I was a joke or they like were afraid of me or whatever. And I sort of just like started embracing some of my worst instincts, and I wasn't really doing well in school academically. I never got in trouble with authority figures and people. That was another reason why, because like the schools I sort of went to, not everyone was a bad kid, but there were like a sizable enough of bad kids who, as they got older, weren't really like bad people. They just didn't really have very good parents, and some of which I ended up later, if not being on good terms with, later started befriending them. And so, and like, I, uh, if you were to ask somebody who knows of me but never really got to know me as like a friend or a family member, they might perceive me as someone with like no chill at all. And not only does Carcat have his fair share of like rage-inducing moments and like moments of condescend condescending towards not only the humans but also like his fellow troll friends. At the end of the day, when he's calm, I, when Carcat is calm and focused and is talking to somebody he legitimately cares about, like that one scene with Terezi when she's like completely down in the dumps, and he's just like he's at the end of the day like passionately expressing his emotions, and maybe he might even be shouting to some degree, but like he's only doing that because a he's quite perceptive, and two because he really cares about Terezi and the people he loves. And anytime I'm ever like passionately spewing whatever coming out of my mouth is because I legitimately care about what I'm saying, or I care about who I'm talking about or who I'm talking to. And there was one moment during like one of the Alternia bound segments where Carcat talked to Terezi, who is starting to lose her confidence because she feels so insecure in the shadow of her ancestor. And then like Carcat talks about how much her ancestor's epic girl persona is such a well crafted fake, and how she's only doing this because she likes the attention it gives her. And then he talks about how all the other dance sisters were essentially like two-dimensional versions of real people, which is actually something I legitimately felt about certain people at school, which is what really frustrated me about them. And then when he goes on that tirade about how they're like two-dimensional people, Terezi goes, "So you mean like teenagers?" And then when I read that line, everything like just fell into place. Like that's why, because like you, of course you barely have a personality when you're a teenager. Your brain isn't properly developed. It was moments like that that not only made me like appreciate Homestuck, but also just like if I because like I technically have like a top three in terms of like favorite trolls. Like Carcat's at the top, and the other two are like, well, make that a top four. So from one, it's Carcat, two is Terezi. well, it tends to flip from Terezi and Gamzee. They tend to switch 2 and 3 for me, and like number 4 is Vriska.
Oh yeah,
I,
those are probably my favorite.
yeah. I want to. Did you two go through like sort of an emotional roller coaster with Vriska?
Oh yeah. Originally, I wasn't like I really thought she was like, do something, John. Blah blah blah. And then at points I'm like, all right, you need to calm down there, pal. But most of the time, I really liked Vriska. She's probably one of my favorite characters.
Yeah,
Throughout the comic she develops.
it's weird. Like she does like so many good and bad things, and yet she doesn't feel different at all. Like the same attitude she takes towards doing something good, she takes when she's doing something bad. And
Yeah.
yeah, and it was just like yeah, most Vriska's appeal at the end of the day for me is mostly due to because like she like most of the people in Homestuck, she is like a well written character. But honestly, most of my appreciation is um, probably comes from how much I was invested in her because I just wanted to see where and like I for whatever reason one of my favorite moments was like near the end you have the where you have like the original Vriska, we got to know where she's dead and she started dating Mina, and then you have like the other Vriska who, well, the game over timeline Vriska, she's known, and then the Alpha timeline. Yeah, Vriska the pirate and Vriska the one, the more well adjusted one, I guess. And then like she's going on this whole tirade about how like pirate Vriska sort of let everything go to shit basically, and like she eventually became she dancestored herself basically. Like she sort of became like a shallow reflection of what Vriska could be and was. So and like when she was like kind of tearing into her, it was it goes back to her like being able to do good and bad things and yet still feel like the same person, because like this was both a good and bad thing at the same time, because she, to me, the stuff that Alpha Timeline Vriska was saying about Pirate Vriska was like well deserved, but at the same time, you're sort of like breaking a very insecure person's spirit, and you kind of stole her girl from for and but the only reason Mina left that version of Vriska was because um, Alpha Timeline Vriska had more confidence and she felt more secure in who she was and the decisions she made. So it was like one of the most impressive moments I had ever seen, and then like all of that emotional baggage was like paid off in that flash where like both dead versions, where the dead version of Vriska and the dead version of Terezi meet up in that negative space, and they kind of like make up, and it was just like the ending point of Act 6 had so many like powerful moments. The two that stand out to me was the one I just told you about, and for some reason that scene where John like got to play the huge pipe organ and blew away all the gunk corrupting the game session.
Yeah.
Cause like,
Um.
what honestly, not only did the whole thing sound legitimately beautiful, but sound and look beautiful, but it was yet another rendition of the Doctor theme. Because like at one point I heard like the certain notes and I was like, oh my god, it's the theme, and I think I might have like shed a couple tears from just the sheer emotions I was feeling at that point. You know,
Honestly. I don't know. There's a lot of relation like built up throughout Homestuck, and I'm kind of sad that a couple of them didn't play out.
Like which ones?
Honestly, I thought John and Vriska were gonna get together.
Really?
Yeah,
Hmm.
because well, it might not seem like it. They both had a pretty like compatible like personalities.
Yeah, I guess I could see that because um, um, so like I'm not sure if you've like seen this. I only really found out about it by accident, but like there was like this wasn't trending or even like it wasn't even hashtag, but like a bunch of like people who work for what pumpkin, which is the company who like which is Andrew Hussey's company, like a bunch of people who worked for what pumpkin and like other fan artists and creators started like developing this head canon that uh in like both routes of the epilogue, basically like John is like depressed that he pretty much didn't really live as much as an eventful and fulfilling life as he did during the game session, and most people um, um, got this idea that if more story content came out for Homestuck, they wanted to have like an arc where John realizes that he's trans, and at first that was sort of like surprising, but the more I like thought about it, heard people's opinions about it, and like there was one of them even like held like this jam session where they wrote like June Egbert fan fiction as they called it, and like a couple of those there were like pairings between her and Vriska, and like so it was quite a fascinating thing, and like most of these people who were contributing it were indeed like trans. So I wouldn't be against it, but like as long as because like as I've gotten older and like felt jaded toward like fandoms to some degree, I thought to myself that like it's not worth, even if I don't like what happens, it's not worth getting too mad at creators whenever they do stuff, because as I'm not even concerned if they like make it work or not, as long as they're like proud of what they made, feel confident in what they made, and they don't like make something abhorrently offensive, then you can do whatever you want. I can't
Yeah,
stop a creator for doing whatever they want. So if that does indeed happen, then I'll just see how it plays out. And regardless of how I feel, I hope the people who wanted this liked it. I hope it was made with confidence, and I hope it's as good as it can be.
yeah,
Yeah, and like I remember like there's this podcast called the Perfectly Generic Podcast, and they did this one episode where they talked about what they could do and what they would like to see. And so yeah, if it does happen, then it does happen, I guess. So there were some really decent like fan art, and like like the the two stories that I read were like really good, but that was mostly because I can't help but feel like that was mostly because those were written by people who like made fan content for years, and I think one of them was even like a What Pumpkin employee. So yeah. Um so Act 4 is also where we get introduced to the trolls properly. Like we see them as their alien selves, even though we only get to see pictures of Carcat, Terezi, Solix. I think we have we see dialogue from Vriska, I believe. I think we even I don't know if we I can't remember if we see Vriska in Act 4. And then like we see like actually no we technically do, but we only get to see a shot of her horns. But yeah, Terezi. Well, we also see Tavros, but we only see him in like chat box form. And I we see a picture of Fairy, but she doesn't talk in that part. And this is also where two, um, well, three, I should say, significant things happen in the comic at this point. We get the first 413 related thing, and it's the Jack ascend where like Jack gets like fed up with all the clown stuff on Durst and kills the queen and becomes the unbeatable demon that he is before he gets the Beck Noir powers. What was your reaction when Jack ascended and then like he started going on all the I guess I should say four because like Jack ascend was indeed the first time something 413 related. And one thing I am kind of impressed by with Andrew Hussey is that he um, produced so much in just a year because acts 1 to 4 were made over were made over like the course of a year, and it bled into a little bit of the rest of the year, but still, because like he didn't really have much going on in his life at this point because he literally said that making Homestuck was basically just him typing and drawing pages as fast as he could and uploading them as the day they were finished. What were you surprised to find out that Homestuck wasn't drawn in MS Paint?
It wasn't.
No, it was drawn in Photoshop, and like
Well,
the reason he called it MS Paint was maybe one of his because before he started posting stuff on MS Paint Adventures. He had another website called Team Special Olympics, which has a bunch of older stuff on it. And then even before he had that website, he was posting stuff to the Penny Arcade forums.
I now I've just found out that he has done it all in the MS.
Yeah, I thought so too, but then like the first page we see of Andrew Hussey's self-insert character, if you look closely at the stuff he's working with, he it was all drawn in Photoshop.
Huh.
Which makes sense because there was some stuff, especially with the animations, even before he started getting fans to help work on it. Um, that yeah, some of this stuff could, while looking simple, could indeed only have been done with like at least at that time with Photoshop because like well MS Paint is still like a basic drawing program compared to most other stuff on the market. I'm not sure if it's just like decades worth of updates, but it feels like more of a worthwhile drawing program than like the stereotypes would lead you to believe or whatever. Because I've seen some simple but impressive stuff be done in MS Paint, and then I've seen some incredible stuff done in MS Paint. To go back to that podcast I was telling you, not the podcast. So there was like this so one thing another one of the many things that fans have created is an online convention called Stuck at Home Con, and basically it's like a convention held entirely within a Discord server, and then there's like and then certain YouTubers would either make like live streams or videos relating to Homestuck. So there's like this one live stream, and then like one of the live streams had a wet pumpkin in play on it, and like she talked about how like when she was trying to get one of her cousins into the comic, it caught the attention of her dad, and like the reason intrigued him because her dad was a science fiction writer, and he just found all of this incredible, and he asked who wrote this, and she replied with one dude in his bedroom. Is the truth, because like with the exception of like website maintenance, game program, music, and art occasionally. Homestuck was indeed like masterminded by one dude. And what's interesting, on the topic of art, um, uh, all of his stuff may look simple at best and crappy at worst, but that was all intentional. He's actually like a really good artist. Like he had this like graphic novel by the name of Whistles, and like a lot of the pages have like a ton of like well drawn perspective shots, and just like crowd and like um like landscape views of towns, and I was quite surprised to see how well drawn it was. Yeah,
Yeah, you can definitely tell exceptionally bad. Like,
yeah,
uh,
but but I kind of there are a lot of yeah there are a lot. I was gonna yeah I was gonna say that there was some stuff that looked like amateur oversights, but then like I thought to myself, if that wasn't done intentionally, that was just him essentially doing like minimal effort to look as amateurish as possible.
especially with the caliber.
Yeah, the homo suck stuff. But
Yeah.
believe it or not, that deviant art link is real, and it's still up.
Oh no.
And like, yeah, Andrew Hussey made a fake deviant art account to host all of those pictures, and like it's still up to there to this day. And like people are still commenting about how like they need eye bleach or whatever. To deviate a bit, not only do we see like Caliborn hijack the narration, but how did you feel reading Homo Suck?
It made me laugh so much because it's like just the way he talks is something that you definitely expect from like someone that is like
Unfortunately for me, my senior year of high school had well a little bit of my junior year and most of my senior year. I was stuck with basically a couple of kids who were pretty much like Caliborn.
oh, oh.
Yeah, cause like, and since I when I got to when I to give you an idea of like how one of these kids was like, he would like casually swear all the time, even if he didn't need to, and then like he was such like this bitter edge lord, and one one time we had to like as part of acting class we had to like rehearse this skit that we were gonna and there was like a little bit of like miscommunication between like another group of like actors who didn't tell us that they were like splintering off to do their own things, so we were still trying to get them under control. And like when we decided to approach them, he was the first one to speak, and instead of like saying, and like we were there were already tensions between us, and we were already frustrated, not at just these group of people, but but other people who were still with our group. So he thought it was a good idea to walk up to these guys who we already have tensions with, and introduce himself by going, "Listen to me, you dumb motherfuckers." And I was like, "Calm down, man. You just blew it for us."
Oh my god.
Yeah, and like he did a whole bunch of like other disrespectful stuff throughout the year, and like one of my other friends used to hang around with him, and like I had suspicions that these guys weren't really the best of people, but I wasn't too sure yet. But then like once like senior year got into like full swing, it was like, oh yeah, these people suck, and like they were so disrespectful at graduation too, because like not only were they like complaining about how hot it was when we were like practicing the things, but like when we got to the actual graduation day, whenever people would this was the this was the part that cemented the in my mind that these dudes are pretty much like Caliborn. Not only did they like seemingly hate everyone at school, but when we were memorializing two kids of our class who had died, they responded with "Who?" And they were also like and they were also like watching meme videos when everyone else was like getting their diplomas and such, and like they were talking about how like those who aren't normal are oppressed, and like the school system is a military regime or whatever, and like these guys, I hated them so much. Yes.
I don't know. You always have to like that in life.
Yeah, it's just that I never thought, I knew these people existed, but I never thought I would actually, like, see them in real life. So, like, when my hatred for these guys started, cementing itself in my mind, and then, like, I got to the Homestuck stuff, and, like, not only is it, like, crudely John, and, like, offensive on so many levels, but, like, the only reason he has Dave and Carcat as like the only uh, gay couple in that version is because he likes them, and he pretty much makes every other girl that he feels bothered enough to include be attractive to Dave, and he also kills off John for no reason. And like when he gets to like, not only does he like draw Vriska and Nepeta, especially in completely disgusting ways, he also like, I think he like called Nepeta a bitch or whatever, and then like when he drew Vriska dead, he said her main fault was her having the audacity to think she'd be irrelevant. And the part, my favorite part of that is when John finds himself in Homosuck, and like he talks about how crappy this horse is, how crappy the stairs are, and then like when he gets to like uh, making Rose and Dave try to kiss each other, he's like, "Stop! They're siblings. You were horrible," and like
Yeah.
I and like before we were told that Rose and Dave were like biological siblings, like there were some people who like shipped them, but then like when the news like came out, everyone just sort of like stopped doing that. But there were still some people like trying to enforce that, so that was largely based off of that. But like I said earlier, Caliborn is pretty much just like the the worst, the frustrating parts of fandom, while someone like Calliope is the more innocent and sincere part of fandom. You may not like it, it might even like frustrate you to some degree, but at the end of the day, they're not doing any harm, unlike Caliborn, who's like making like um
Horrible shit.
horrible shit, yeah. I was gonna say like
Mark.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, he's not using his frustrations in a productive. He's that dude who feels like he could make something better than a whole team of industry professionals on his own and with no budget. Yeah. What was your reaction when Andrew Hussey came into the story?
At first, when I first read it, I was like, "Oh, this self story," and it's like I don't know. It's usually when you start off like when you, especially when someone's like read a lot of fanfiction, read a self-insert story. It's like
Yeah,
the creator makes himself to be like the best person ever.
yeah,
But this, when I start reading into it more, it's like this is really funny.
yeah. Cause
There's
like,
not so much like
cause like Andrew Hussey, the character, I'm not entirely sure if he was like designed to be a parody of OP self-insert characters. Cause like he is in the story a literal god of creation, and like, but but he but he is also written with like some like negative aspects because like there's parts where like his bravado is like gone or is like lost completely, and there's also the fact that he like gets killed by an even more powerful threat who is appropriately the main villain of the story. But like he in that when the character is first introduced, he not only presents himself as this god of creation and like this highly superior being, but then like the next time we see him, he's like afraid of a he's like somehow trapped in an attic, and like he's afraid of like the mantle on the
the
wall.
wolf.
And he has a poorly designed Kanaya cosplay with like smearing ink and everything. And then like the next significant thing he does is like he breaks into Doc Scratch's house and like has a short-term victory, but would later lead to a very long-term negative context. And not only does he like start where you know the part where he's like wearing Lord English's clothes, and then like there's like this link that I think that says, "Are you Lord English?" And it's like, "No, of course I'm not Lord English. That would be a horrible twist in the story of already like stupid twists."
Yeah.
And then like he also does like stuff that to him seem like minor inconveniences, but to the other characters are actually like rather devastating because like he puts his coat in between the two fourth walls, and that ends up causing like a 3 year delay between John and Jade's trip. And then like when he tries to take care of like Jack, he gets stabbed by him a lot.
Yeah.
And honestly, my favorite part is like he knows he's gonna die. He's desperate for everything. He tries to summon the power of Pupa Pan to hopefully defeat
Oh
with
yeah.
the wand. Then he but before and like right when he thinks something might happen, he goes, "Oh, who am I kidding? Magic's fucking fake." And then he gets shot with that space rifle or whatever, and then dies. And then he
Yeah.
spends his afterlife trying to. Well, we think he's trying to marry Vriska, but he's actually trying. We later learn what that ring does, and he tries to. That ring. He actually tried to revive Vriska. But honestly, if you saw a strange orange man in the desert with a ring, what do you think he's trying to do? Especially,
Build a wall.
uh, maybe, but like, I don't know what he can do for, unless that ring is worth like $6 billion. I don't know. So Act Five. Do you remember Jack Ascend, where Jack gets the ring, levels up, and then like he goes on like huge rampage and starts systematically destroying the kids session.
Yeah, and then he becomes a wolf at a point.
Yeah, that's like somewhere in Act Five. so like so you have that video where he levels up, was the first major thing to be um it was released on April 13th, 2010. And before I told you about Homestuck Day, were you aware that 413 played a major part in the not only in just the fandom but also in the comic itself?
Honestly, no, I didn't.
Well, not only would major stuff be released on April 13th, because like it started on April 13th and ended on April 13th, and because like the Act 7 animation was released on April 13th, and then there was like um, and then there was some like bonus stuff, specifically like the credits that were released with it, and then another video was war was like the wandering vagrant who in his time in Skya was like the wary villain, I believe, who like tried to rise up against, tried to unite the soldiers of Durst and Prospit and defeat the Black King together, and he could have done it, but then Jack came up and screwed everything up. That also was like that also I forget. I think that was like the 1000th page, I believe, or something like that. I can't remember. And then, of course, there was the first big animation that attract that initially attracted fans. That was, of course, Descend, and that which was the end of Act 4, and that was the song in that the song in that Flash was made by Toby Fox as well. I think Toby Fox made like he I don't know how much, but some people say he'd made like most of the stuff that got in to the Homestuck comic, and a whole bunch of other artists either made stuff that like had appeared but not as frequently, or were just like regulated to the Homestuck albums, and some of them weren't even meant to have like music to appear in the webcomic. Some of them were just like um, some of them were just like thematic. Some of them were just like conceptual themed albums. Some of them were like soundtracks to the open bound segments, and others were just like a collection of songs that had appeared and weren't initially in the comic up until that point. In terms of like regular Homestuck albums, there's like 10, 11 if you count the soundtrack to Sound Page Collide. And then there's like a whole bunch of like other stuff as well. And honestly, like I have heard like some Homestuck stuff on its own, but I've never felt motivated to like check out an entire Homestuck album, because like some of those songs were released and then were later used in the comics. So I feel like the appeal of those is not only just hearing the songs you got to hear in the comic up to that point, but also hearing songs that could be in the comic and were probably just there as like conceptual pieces and such. And since like Homestuck, the comic has been over for 3 years now, there isn't as much as a need to listen to those as they you might have thought. And also because I've sort of become a little jaded towards soundtrack music in a sense, because like I still like to listen to it, but I don't listen to it the same way I like listen.
to like a regular album, because the more I got into music, the more I realized all of these songs sounded good was because they were like designed to sound good with the setting they were composed for, which kind of makes it hard to like listen to them on their own. So like um, in regards to the to Descend, um, uh, while a certain other animation would be significantly more popular in the wrong one and garner a lot more attention. This was sort of like the first big break Homestuck had at capturing a wider audience, and also some historians, I use the term a little loosely, believe that most of these new fans who came from seeing Descend were like originally fans of Hetalia, because at the time Hetalia was like inescapably popular, much like Homestuck, and even like the Homestuck and Hetalia fandoms had like a love hate relationship between each other. But eventually, Homestuck did indeed win out in a sense, even if later down the road it had to deal with other um, fandoms. But yeah, Descend was the first, and then the one another spark of interest to casual non-readers was, of course, Act 5, Part 1, aka Hive Bent, which is where we're properly introduced to the trolls and we get their char- and we get to know their characters to some degree. So when we got to this part and it turned out to be an entire arc centering around the trolls, how did you feel about that? And like what was going on through your head as you like were reading it?
Honestly, like during that time, first time reading, I was kind of confused because like in previous like when I was reading is usually like at so it's dead tired. Sometimes I'd skip some things,
Yeah.
and so I'm like I was pretty confused. So when I came back to it the second time, I liked how everything tied in together,
Yeah.
and how the story had progressed by the time. Things are a bit odd.
I think you might be cutting out.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there was like long stretches. There were just like long pauses, and I wasn't sure if you were cutting out or not.
I don't know. You just saw a lot of character development and how each of their stories tied together.
So in this part of the story, when we got to know the trolls, who at this point in time was your favorite, and who had like the best typing quirk, and which one was the hardest to read for you initially?
Initially,
Yeah, like
the hardest to read
yeah,
was probably Solus.
really, because like at first glance I was a little intimidated, but then I got used to it because he clearly had like a duality thing going on, and that would to this day it's sort of like my favorite one, because I don't I think it's just the most fun to like pretend to type with, because like all of them are like really there is one that the one that was hardest for me to read was Fairies and Minas, because I got frustrated with the fish puns and I hated what they were doing with the parentheses.
Oh, I love fish.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I got more mileage out of Equius and Horace's horse puns than I did the fish puns. Like I think I choked one time when I think I literally
gagged when I was reading these fish puns. I was just going like, oh god. I don't know. I
I
think.
don't know. I love fish puns in general. That's why if you see me ever type shore,
Yeah,
like some I type shore instead of sure quite a.
yeah.
I don't know why. It's just I do it. But I think my favorite tree is probably.
Like, like,
There's something just about everything Gamma writes is very like
are we talking about just like Stone Gamzee or like all of Gamzee?
almost all of Gamzee, but even like Stone Gamzee, it's like pretty chill
Yeah, cause like,
and just the way he talks.
yeah, it, I think my favorite moment of like Act 5 in general, not just like the hive bent part, is when like he's talking with Dave, which was already hilarious enough, but then like he not only shows him what the Insane Clown Posse is, but then he gives him a link to the Miracles music video, and then after
Yeah.
and then like you just see these panels of him just slowly getting frustrated, and then there's this one panel where he's going, "This is blasphemy," and that's it.
Yeah.
Sets him off. Um, yeah, I liked. I feel like I feel weird saying this, but I feel like one of the reasons I liked Gamesy initially because I think I got more jokes than I would have if I wasn't already familiar with the Insane Clown Posse as I was. Because like in
I wasn't familiar with them at all. Thanks to Homestuck that I discovered them.
well, I got I haven't listened to all their albums. I've only listened to like their first four, and what really got me interested in was just like I was just kind of curious, and like I think another thing that got me interested was that like I got into him like in 2017, and then they I started like researching them, and they sort of had like a weirdly fascinating history, not only in the world of like music, but also just like the world in general, because like they were pretty big in the 90s and early 2000s, and they were pretty like they were not only big in the music world, but they were just like big in just like media coverage in general, because like I have no idea why people thought that two dudes in clown makeup and spraying Fago and all this uh, over the top circus stuff was anything worth taking seriously. But the media like demonized him a lot, and like they made a mockery of like juggalos in general. And like I've seen like footage from I've seen like footage of like the gathering of the Juggalos, which is their annual festival, and just like I did some research about Juggalo and Juggalo subculture and just like the Insane Clown Posse in general, and I'm just like these because like when they're at the concerts, when they're actually like at concerts, they're a little more rowdy, but more or less because they're just like exciting and having fun. When they're just like enjoying the festival itself, when there's no music going around, they're just like relatively cheer people, like chill people. Like they're barely like doing. I think the worst they're doing is just like smoking weed. I think they drank more Fago than they did alcohol, and just like riding carnival rides, having like mini shows as well. And I thought to my and like the lyrics of Insane Clown Posse are like dark to some degree, but they're also like really silly and stupid to some degree that you kind of wonder why anyone was frightened by this at all. Because like not only did they get like a bunch of like negative media coverage, Juggalos are listed as an official gang in the FBI database with like people with people like MS-13 and like the Crips and Bloods and such. It is
Huh.
uh, police officers can legally pull you over if you're wearing any sort of like Juggalo memorabilia. Hot Topic stopped selling Insane Clown Posse merchandise so they could avoid not being arrested. And like they've had many protests, they've even like sued the FBI to get off multiple times. And like in 2017, they had like this rally and protest concert to hopefully get that done. And I'm not entirely sure if they've achieved their goal yet or not.
I find it kind of odd that like how the singers for the Insane Clown Posse, they're pretty like accepting of everything about it.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't know.
Even other fandoms.
Yeah, cause like Violent J has like a fursuit, and like his daughter, I believe, is a furry, and they went to a furry convention with their
Yeah.
fursuits. I thought that was pretty cool, and to um, to deviate from the Insane Clown Posse a little bit, during the height of the Homestuck fandom, whether no one knows if this was intentional or not, but like the official Snoop Dogg Facebook account shared Homestuck themed fan art of Snoop Dogg with Vriska and Nepeta, and like no one knows if he was in on the Homestuck stuff or if it was just him sharing artwork he thought was cool, but that happened like in 2012. Yeah, there's also a bunch of like other random Homestuck related stuff that you kind of have to do a bit of digging for. My personal favorite was like there is an actual dude who exists whose real name is Dave Schreider, and he was like running for mayor in his personal town, I believe, and like his campaign page had like a bunch of like um, Dave Strider references, and like I think he even like photoshopped him.
Oh no.
I think he photoshopped himself a pair of sunglasses and Dave's shirt. It,
Oh.
it was quite surreal, and so um, a lot happened in Hive Bands, but like the only real eventful thing to me, at least from my memory, because like I was still sort of just like skimming through stuff, and there was a and and there are some aspects of Homestuck that feel better when you binge read it, but the Hive Bend stuff I feel like was a sort of a lot to take in all at once, and
Oh yeah.
because like not only are you being introduced to the trolls, you're being introduced to their society to some degree, their hemo spectrum, their typing quirks, their lucis, some history about their ancestry, um, their
The
various
reason they type.
yeah the reason they type the way they do, the characters themselves and who they are, and like the personal history between each of them, flarping. It was a lot.
Yeah, definitely. My second time around, I understood a lot more, and I definitely could appreciate it more when I.
Yeah, and um, when the only thing that I have the only thing that really stuck out to me was like the ending, make her pay, and also like part of Terezi, and um, most of the appeal of the it kind of it kind of serves the same purpose like Acts 1 and 2 did, but like
the fact that it's on an alien planet with an alien culture kind of made it a lot more interesting. And plus, at this point, you knew for a fact Homestuck was indeed going somewhere with all of this. So there is also that, and also there was a larger cast than the initial four kids, and they had such distinct personalities and also the typing quirks. Most people, this was the second, the entire Hivebent arc was like the second major thing that drove new readers in, because it didn't really need much. You didn't really need to know much about Homestuck going in order to get mileage out of uh, in order to get mileage out of the this part of the webcomic. And then uh, Homestuck hadn't exactly wasn't so big at this point that going to read everything at once was as intimidating as it is now. So people not only read through Hivebent, they also got to read through the rest of um, Homestuck as well. And honestly, the first time reading Homestuck, you sort of just like sitting there, borderline bored for a bit, and then like something, whether something you read, something you saw, or one of the videos kind of like grabs your attention and just kind of makes you go, oh shit. For Hivebent, it was the make her pay video, mostly because like that Fandom Files video I showed you, I saw footage of it when he was like doing transitions, and I thought the animation of Vriska and Tavros flying and Vriska doing all of these like interesting little poses, whether detailed or in her default form, um, looked pretty cool. And the song that was going with it, I thought was pretty cool. But the song he used with the transition slides was not the song used in that, so I was a little disappointed. But when I went to revisit the video, I grew a greater appreciation of it, and and in addition to that, the part where like Carcat is typing out, no, not Carcat, Arania, when she's in that robot body, um, talking about essentially summarizing what happened to their world, how they fought the Black King, won, and then they were about to create. They're about to enter the new universe they created, and only to have Jack Noir come up and destroy the gate. And not only was that interesting in itself, because like before I got around to that, I saw this fan animation called Rex Duodeso Angeles, which was a multi-animator collaboration, essentially like making animation based off of what might an animated version of that battle would have looked like. And it was not only so good and so popular, Hussey himself essentially said that this is pretty much how the fight would have went down. So it's practically canon. And one thing that probably would have been cool is that like, even though I'm kind of, after getting to that point, I can understand why he didn't do this. I thought it would be cool if he like updated the website to when they get to that part. That's what you see instead of the text. But it would be kind of weird to see that video, then the comic, then Arania's description of the events that go down, and then you just zoom out seeing that they're in space on a meteor and they left their universe for dead, essentially. And then, like, before, like, part 2 of Act 5 happens, you see Carcat witnessing John growing up and him becoming, like, envious of all of the love and appreciation he got through life, and he develops his hate crush on him, of course. Yeah. To go back to hussy self inserts. I thought it was funny enough when he first came on and he uh, posted that comedically long um, recap of Homestuck up to that point. But I thought it was also funny when we were learning about the troll romance, and believe it or not, I actually read took the time to read through the troll romance because I did kind of want to understand it, and it wasn't really that frustrating of an experience. I as I thought more about Homestuck, I realized there's a whole bunch of like systems